Hi, so today I want to talk about two books that I started off my month of June with, which really started off pretty strong. So the first book is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which was first written and published in 1985, I believe. So it is a dystopian book, a very near future type of setting in the United States, where one of the states has essentially taken over the country and has a completely new regime. So what I basically understood is that women have different roles. You have the handmaids, which are child bearers. There are wives, which I wasn't entirely sure what their purpose was, other than maybe just having more power, more say in the household. Then you have there were aunts, which I guess are kind of like the teachers or the ones who mold the handmaids. And there were other ones too. I wasn't entirely sure what their role was because it mostly focused on our main character, Offred, who is forced into being a handmaid, and they make that decision based on your fertility. The very beginning was very confusing, but also gave you enough information to understand that she's essentially in this building a school, I guess, with other women who have been caught. Again, none of this was very explicit, so this is my understanding of how it happened, but women who are caught and who are being taught by these aunts, telling them basically that before, when women didn't dress properly, which essentially means didn't cover their skin more, if they made eye contact with men, they were essentially asking for it and they deserved it if they got raped or if they were abused, which obviously is terrible. But so they're trying to say essentially that their new system is much better. I don't want to get into too many spoilers, but I will say the topics in this book were very interesting, and it was a book that made you think a lot, especially when it is from the point of view of a woman who has just basically given up and who seems to be watching the present world and her past from a very like bird's eye viewpoint of view, not really a part of anything. She seems disconnected from everything, which makes sense, but it makes you think quite a bit. And it also, as a woman reading it, it's terrifying because it genuinely seems like something that could happen. Now, something I did find interesting was this strange power dynamic. Like, it made it seem like the women had all the power, but the men were also the ones who pushed it toward this. So I wasn't able to really understand how any of this came to be. Why are there women who, like, why is it so rare to have a child? What happened? Was there some kind of, I don't know, radiation thing that happened? How did this come to be? Why is it so pressing for women to have children? Who really came up with this regime? It kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's only around the book that you kind of get a sense of the rebellion that happened, but even then there isn't a lot of details on how it happened. So I will say overall this book, I liked it. It wasn't my favorite, and I know there's a sequel. I might pick it up out of curiosity, but really the pace super slow, especially after like about a third into the book. I kind of disconnected. I didn't want to pick up the book that much. I wasn't super interested in continuing it. But I kept reading because I was like, oh, well, now it's mentioning this pretty gruesome thing, but now it's slowing down again. Oh my gosh, there's this really terrible thing happening, and it slows down again. Oh my gosh, there's a rebellion. There is a underground force, but we get no details on it and nothing's really happening. Like, it's kind of how I felt throughout the book. So I wouldn't say that it's a fun book to read. Nothing really happens that much, but overall, an interesting book, and I do recommend it for anyone who wants a dystopia that is very much focused on really women being abused. It's very focused on women and what they're capable of, but also the manipulation of them and kind of why it's so important to manipulate women if you want society to continue. So it was quite the critique on society and what would happen if women were monopolized just brainwashing in general. Like it was very disturbing, but also very slow. So the balance was off for me. The next book that I read was actually an audiobook, and it was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Russell, I believe is her name. I don't know her middle name. So I started My Dark Vanessa at the end of May, and I was listening to it as an audiobook, and I gotta say, holy crap, the girl who read the book, who did the audiobook, she did a great job. So this one, I loved this one. And now, I don't oftentimes read literary fiction, but this book was, So if you don't know, Dark Vanessa is essentially about a young girl who has an affair with her high school teacher at a boarding school. And this high school teacher is much older than her, like maybe 30 years older than her. And you get basically the back and forth between her now when she's, I think she's 32 years old. And then you get her when she was 15, and then you get her at like 21, 23. But so you get the progression of how it all happens. So of course when she's 15, as a reader, you know that everything that's happening is totally wrong. Not okay, inappropriate, oh my gosh, something should be done. But the way it's written, as a girl who obviously was 15 at some point, there were so many parts that I understood and that I connected with. The justifications that she gives herself and the teacher for the behaviors, for the things that they did. The, like, repressed sexuality and angsty teenagerness of it. It was just so well done. And it's disturbing because it's one of those things where, as a woman who's reading it, like, it could, like, I probably would have been almost like her in that same situation. And there were scenes that were very disturbing, like the scenes between her teacher and her in intimate relations. It was disturbing because you still see the main character doing these inner monologues with herself where she's talking about how she likes it but she doesn't like it, or that she's not, you know, it's that innocence of adolescence where you think you know what you want, but you clearly don't. And then as she progresses through the story, and it goes back and forth. Like, it's not she starts at 15 and she just gets older. It's, you have a chapter that's when she's 16, a chapter when she's now 32, a chapter when she's 21, 15. It bounces around, and you can see that even still at 21, like, she's still going through hardships of what happened, and it becomes like it's a whole, like, it's dealt with very realistically, which is, it's very gritty and it's very dark, and it's also beautiful at the same time, which I think is why it's so terrifying. But I genuinely love this book. I will say it's not like a fun book to read. It's not, you know, action and all that stuff, but it is very insightful, especially if you open yourself up to how you were when you were younger while you read this book. This book made me feel a lot of stuff. It made me feel angry toward the main character for not recognizing that she was being, you know, that she's in a bad situation, but it also made me empathize with her because, you know, we've all been there. We've all thought terrible things. Like, she mentions at some point a girl who she's, like, watching or thinking of, and she thinks something, and she says, like, she probably kind of enjoyed it, though. Like, she probably kind of enjoyed being abused. Like, this is not necessarily a scenario of her being raped or anything, but, like, being inappropriately touched by a teacher or something like that. And she's talking about how, well, she probably kind of liked it. Or, like, come on, has no one ever fantasized a little bit about these things happening to you? And it's really terrible because that's one of those things where you don't want to admit that you think about it sometimes, that you've never had a back thought, but some people do. And I know for me, like, I've thought about it once or twice, and it's terrible. You stop yourself. You're like, shit, no, that's terrible. And that's why I think this book was so amazing to me, is the reality of it, the unforgiving reality of what she's saying, but also how she has to grow from it and how she has to accept little by little that everything that's happened to her, like, it wasn't okay, and how to deal with it. And then there's like, it goes into also just how she, you know, leaves high school and then she has a job, and just dealing with, essentially, with mental illness and with trauma. And I thought it was just so well done. Listen, all I can say is that I don't read literary fiction often, but this one is amazing. And I would say that for someone who is a little worried about getting into literary fiction and doesn't really know where to go, I would recommend this one, though I will say, huge trigger warning. I recommend the audiobook as well if you can get it from your library, because, oh man, just really good. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. I probably will get the physical copy and read it as well, because I do think that there is a difference between listening to the book and reading the book. I think both are perfectly acceptable ways of reading, but I do want to read it physically and see how I feel about it like that. So anyways, those were my 2 books that I started my month of June with. Pretty powerful books, both of them pretty disturbing, having some heavy topics, but I enjoyed starting off the month with this, oddly enough. Anyways, let me know what you started reading in June down in the comments, and if you like this video, like, subscribe, more links down below. I will also post affiliate links into the description. The affiliate links I use are not Amazon links. It is for bookshop.org, which supports local bookstores, so please check them out. And that's it for me. I will see you next time. Bye bye.